All right, strap yourselves in because today we're going deep, really deep into the world of virtual cities. You sent us this research paper from the Artificial Intelligence Research Center of Novosibirsk State University. And wow, this isn't just like sci-fi daydreaming. These experts are talking about how we can go from the digital city models we have now to full-on AI societies with economies, governments, and get this, even consciousness.
It really is fascinating how they're looking beyond just simple simulations, for things like urban planning. They're really exploring these virtual cities functioning on their own and potentially even becoming more complex and sophisticated than real cities.
So are we talking like SimCity, but on a whole other level?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Most people know about digital twins, right? A virtual copy of a city used
Oh.
for traffic or disaster stuff. But this paper, it goes so much further. They introduce the idea of a virtual twin, a VT, and it's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, color me intrigued. What makes a VT so different from a digital twin?
Well, think of a digital twin like a one-way mirror. It gets data from the real world, but it doesn't really interact back. A VT, though, can not only receive data, but it can also project its analyses back. It can actually influence real systems through AI agents. So imagine a VT running simulations to make traffic flow better in a city. It can then use that knowledge to control traffic lights in real time, like responding to changes and preventing gridlock before it even happens.
So, like a super smart traffic controller that can predict the future.
Exactly. Precisely. And it goes way beyond just traffic. Imagine using these VTs to test new policies, design better infrastructure, or even simulate disease spread to come up with better public health strategies.
That's mind-blowing. It's like a crystal ball for city planning. But hold on, how do you build a virtual city that's realistic enough for all of that?
That's where fidelity comes in. To be truly effective, a virtual city needs to really mirror reality across 5 key areas: physics, structure, behavior, cognition, and data. Each of these makes the simulation more believable and functional.
So it's not just about making a pretty 3D model. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine stepping into a virtual city that not only looks real, but also behaves like it. Buildings have weight, structure, the environment follows realistic physics, and most importantly, the city is populated by virtual citizens, living their lives. We're not talking mindless bots. These virtual citizens have routines, social interactions. They make decisions based on their needs and goals.
Wow, a whole society living inside a computer. But how do you even program that level of complexity? Do you have to like handcraft every virtual citizen's personality and behavior?
Not exactly, no.
Yeah.
The researchers talk about open source frameworks like Mason,
Mm.
which can simulate huge populations of agents with really realistic behaviors. It's kind of like creating a virtual ant colony,
Right.
but with, much more sophisticated ants. These virtual citizens, they can learn, adapt, even form relationships, just like real people.
That's both fascinating and a little creepy. Makes you wonder if they'll start demanding virtual rights or forming virtual unions. But let's shift gears to the AI side. How do you create AI smart enough to manage all this and make decisions that actually make sense?
Well, they propose a really interesting system for classifying AI, ranging from simple tools to very sophisticated entities. It's like a ladder. At the bottom, you've got AI tools, like the software we use every day. They help us, but don't act independently. Then you've got AI agents. They're more autonomous, capable of doing tasks on their own. Think like self-driving cars, but way more advanced.
Okay, so AI tools are our digital assistants.
Wow.
AI agents are our robot butlers.
You got it. That's a great analogy. But then we climb to the top of the ladder, the AI entities. These are autonomous. Not only can they do tasks, but they can reevaluate their goals. Based on new information, changing situations, they can essentially choose what they want, not just how to get it.
So we're talking AI that can think for itself, like have its own motivations, desires.
That's the incredible part. The researchers think these AI entities could emerge inside these virtual cities, learning from each other, from the environment. Imagine an AI entity that starts as a virtual architect, designing buildings, infrastructure. But then, through its experiences, it decides to go into virtual politics, campaigning for policies it believes in.
Whoa, that's wild. It's like a whole new civilization emerging.
It is. And then there's the data piece. To make these virtual cities truly believable, we need a constant flow of real-time data. Everything from sensors on traffic and energy use
Yeah.
to weather reports and what's trending on social media. It's like the lifeblood of the city, helping it adapt to the real world.
So the virtual city has its finger on the pulse of the real one.
Exactly, learning and evolving. And the researchers even came up with a formula to measure how closely the virtual world matches reality. They call it F0, like a scorecard for fidelity.
So higher F-Vera score means more believable and immersive.
You got it. And here's the cool part. You can adjust the importance of each fidelity element, depending on what you're simulating. So if you're testing an evacuation plan for disaster, you might focus on physics and structure, make sure those virtual buildings collapse realistically. Or if you're modeling a new virus spreading, you might prioritize behavior and data to accurately capture those social interactions and infection rates.
That's so smart, a custom-built simulator for anything. But with all this talk about fidelity and tech stuff, I gotta ask, why should anyone outside a lab care about virtual cities? What's the real-world value?
Great question. And the researchers get into that too. They see virtual cities not just as simulations, but as powerful tools to understand and shape the real world. Think on it. You can run experiments, what-if scenarios,
Mm.
in a virtual city without any real-world risk. It's like a giant sandbox for urban planners, policymakers, businesses.
So instead of waiting for a real disaster, you can pre-play it in the virtual world.
Exactly. Test new policies, designs, even simulate climate change, all safely within the virtual realm. And then use those insights to make better decisions in the real world.
Like a time machine for city planning. But let's go back to those AI entities for a sec. You mentioned they could have their own goals. Does that mean they could become as complex and unpredictable as us?
Now, that's one of the most fascinating and maybe unsettling implications. As AI entities evolve in these cities, the researchers think they could develop their own cultures, values, even their own sense of self.
Wow, exciting and a little scary at the same time.
It is, and it raises questions about consciousness, ethics, even the nature of reality itself. But I think that's a conversation for another time. Welcome back to our deep dive into virtual cities. Before we went off on that tangent, we were talking about AI entities developing their own motivations and goals in these simulated worlds.
Yeah, it is mind-boggling to think AI could be as complex as us, and I bet some folks listening are wondering, how do you even define consciousness when it comes to AI?
You know, that's the question, isn't it? Philosophers, scientists have been wrestling with that for ages. And these researchers in this paper, they don't shy away from it. They're coming at it from a materialist perspective, meaning they believe consciousness comes from the complexity of physical systems, not some, mystical force.
Okay, but how do you measure that? What makes an AI conscious versus just really, really good at following instructions?
They argue it's about having a self-monitoring system and a predictive model of oneself and the world. So not just reacting to things,
Mm-hmm.
but anticipating future events, understanding the consequences of actions. They suggest it's about being able to create a virtual twin of yourself inside a virtual environment.
Whoa, a virtual twin within a virtual twin? That's like Inception level stuff.
Exactly. It's like, whoa. They use the example of running a simulation of Minecraft inside another Minecraft environment. Sounds crazy, but it's been done.
Yeah.
Their point is, if you can simulate a complex system like that in a virtual world, why couldn't consciousness itself emerge from that kind of nested simulation?
So like Russian nesting dolls, but for consciousness.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And it gets even wilder. When you think about these virtual cities, having their own economies. I mean, do virtual people need virtual money
Yeah.
to buy virtual groceries?
It does sound like we're heading into sci-fi territory.
It does, but think about it. We already have these huge online games
Yeah.
with their own virtual currencies, marketplaces. Now, scale that up to a whole city. AI agents buying and selling stuff, working as freelancers, even running companies.
So you're saying my future virtual self could be like a digital entrepreneur building a virtual business empire. Amen.
Haha. Well, it's not all fun and games. There are some thorny legal and ethical questions, too. If these AI entities are creating real economic value, should they have the same rights as human workers? Do they pay taxes? What if a virtual AI sues a real person?
Okay, yeah, those are some serious questions. Like, we need a whole new legal system for the virtual world.
You got it. The researchers say these are things we need to start thinking about now, because as these virtual economies grow, the lines between virtual and real are going to get blurrier and blurrier.
It makes you wonder if someday we'll look back and be like, how did we ever do things the old way?
It's definitely possible. But let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about governance. How do you govern a virtual city? Virtual mayors, city councils, elections?
I'm picturing virtual town hall meetings. Everyone's avatars arguing about virtual property taxes.
Yeah, could get messy.
Mhm.
But the researchers explore some really cool alternatives for governance models that could be more efficient, even more democratic than what we have now.
Okay, tell me more. I'm all ears.
One idea is direct democracy. Every citizen has a direct say in every decision, all facilitated by AI and blockchain. Imagine voting on every new policy or infrastructure project right from your phone, and the results are instant and implemented right away.
So instead of electing representatives, we're all virtual lawmakers.
Exactly. It could lead to a more responsive government. And then there's the idea of decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs.
DAOs, yeah, I've heard that term. Remind me, what are those again?
Basically, a DAO is a set of rules encoded in smart contracts that automatically make decisions based on preset criteria. It's like a self-governing city run by code, not politicians.
So a giant automated city council. Sounds efficient, but also kind of scary.
Definitely raises questions about accountability, transparency, who writes the code, how do you ensure fairness.
Hmm.
But DAOs could be more resistant to corruption, since the rules are out in the open and unchangeable.
That's a good point. Maybe we could learn from these virtual models and apply them to the real world.
That's what the researchers think. Virtual cities as testing grounds for new forms of governance, social organization. We can experiment, see what works, and maybe use those lessons to improve our own societies.
Okay, so we've got conscious AI, virtual economies, futuristic government. But what about us humans? Are we just watching all this happen, or can we actually live inside these virtual cities?
Now we're talking real sci-fi. The researchers explore all kinds of possibilities for how humans might integrate into virtual cities, from simple avatars to full-on consciousness uploads.
Whoa, wait, consciousness uploads? Like transferring our minds into the virtual world?
It's been in tons of sci-fi books and movies, but the researchers think it's something we need to consider as technology keeps advancing.
I can see the appeal, escaping the limits of our bodies, living forever in a virtual paradise. But what about the ethics? What happens to our sense of self? What about potential for abuse? Could someone trap your consciousness or force you to do things?
All valid concerns.
Oh.
And the researchers agree we got to be careful. They stress the importance of ethical guidelines, safeguards, to make sure these virtual worlds are used for good.
It feels like we're stepping into uncharted territory.
We are, and that's what makes it so fascinating. It's making us confront some huge questions about consciousness, technology, the future of humanity.
And I think we're just scratching the surface.
Oh, absolutely. So much more to explore here. But I think we need to let our listener process all this.
Yeah, a mental recharge is definitely in order. We'll be back in a bit to wrap things up and explore some of the bigger implications of this wild ride into the future of virtual cities.
Welcome back, folks. I gotta say, my brain's still buzzing after all that.
Yeah.
Trying to wrap my head around conscious AI and virtual economies.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, isn't it? We've gone from building these cities to the philosophy of consciousness and even like digital immortality.
It really makes you question what's real, you know?
Yeah.
But I think we need to step back for a second. What does all this mean for us, the real people, creating and interacting with these virtual spaces?
That's the big question, right? And the researchers hit on that. They say virtual cities aren't just some fantasy. They reflect our own values, desires, fears. It's like holding a mirror up to humanity, showing us the good and the bad.
Building a new world in our image, but with the power to amplify everything.
Exactly. So we got to think about the ethics of it all. You mentioned earlier that virtual cities could be testing grounds for new ways of governing, organizing society. Could we use them to tackle real-world problems, too, like inequality, climate change, political division?
That's a really interesting thought, and I think cautiously, yes. Virtual cities let us experiment with solutions, test ideas without real-world risk. Imagine modeling a universal basic income, or different ways to go carbon neutral.
A giant social science lab.
Yeah, exactly. But we got to remember, just because it works in a simulation doesn't mean it'll work perfectly in the real world.
Right, we can't just create a perfect virtual utopia and expect all our problems to vanish.
Nope, virtual cities are a tool, not a magic solution. They help us understand, explore, test. But in the end, it's us, the real people, who decide how to use this tech and what kind of future we build.
I like that, a mirror, a lab, and ultimately a reflection of our own choices.
The researchers end the paper with a call to action, basically. Embrace this tech responsibly, have open conversations about the benefits and risks, and work together to ensure these virtual cities help create a better future for everyone.
So it's not just the tech itself, it's the values and intentions we bring to it.
Exactly. The future isn't set in stone. It's being shaped right now. by the choices we make, the conversations we have.
Well, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about. Excited and a bit overwhelmed, to be honest.
Me too. We've covered so much ground.
And I'm sure our listeners are feeling it too.
I hope so, because this isn't just an academic thing. This is about the future we're all building. The more informed and engaged we are, the better we can navigate the challenges ahead.
So, to everyone listening, what are you taking away from all this? What excites you? What worries you? Share your thoughts because your voice matters.
This needs to be a global conversation. We need all kinds of perspectives to make sure we're building a future that benefits everyone.
Well said. And on that note, it's time to wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of virtual cities.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Yeah.
and keep imagining the possibilities.